Welcome everybody. This is STL Cyber Meetup.
You shoot off some fireworks, man.
No, pay attention.
We need a gavel. Once it goes.
Give it a minute. Talking too loud.
Well, we're back. You know, I mean, it took us a while, but you know, I'm glad that everyone kind of made it out. So I know, celebration, right? It's actually good to have that community again. He just doesn't have a booming voice. Well, I hope you guys don't mind, but what we're gonna do is kind of go through about like kind of how we got to where we are. You know, the TechArt team, we have a variety of different experience sets and skills, and like I know that I've often been asked like how I actually got into cybersecurity, and it's kind of funny because I've been doing a lot of traveling lately, and I've been renting a lot of cars. Well, the guy at the rental car booth found out that like I was in cybersecurity, and he's like, oh, how do I get into it? How do I get in the field? You know, I have a CMIS degree, but I want to get in there, and I'm stuck at the rental car place. So, you know, over time, of course, I've been out there for multiple trips, you know, back and forth. I've been kind of sharing information with them and like telling them where to go and kind of keeping track of them for like the past 6 months. And, you know, now I got a frontline way to get to the rental car to bypass the line. But on top of that, it's like, you know, these are questions that a lot of people like ask, and a lot of people ask us all the time. So we were just going to kind of go through a little bit of our experience and how we got to where we are, because I know a lot of us have different ways of getting there. So I don't know. I hope that's okay with you guys, and hopefully it's going to be more of a kind of a collaborative experience. You know, I'd like to hear about like how some of you guys got to where you are too, and maybe some of the struggles and some of the problems that you're seeing with. I know. Yeah, we'll leave you out of it. So, but just like how we've all kind of gotten to the place, because you know we're all a part of this growing community that you know really took off in the past 15 years. So it's kind of a moment for us to celebrate like where we came, and you know how we can kind of share with some people on how we can bring like the newer generation into the fold. So.
Thanks, Grant. So in 2020, as you know, there's a little bit of a thing going on. So, but in 2020, we did add quite a few people. We added what, 4 people to the team or something like that. And we had talked about going back and forth about, you know, these guys right here, Shannon too, but these younger guys here, how they got into cybersecurity and stuff like that. And that kind of ballooned into, why don't we all tell our stories? Because we all have different stories, and we all kind of went about it the same way, not the same way, different ways. So we all kind of decided we're going to go up here and tell you how we each got into this, and that might help people out there decide what career path they want to go. So my name is Nate Price. I initially got interested in technology when I was a kid. So I remember when I was a kid, I had a BB gun. I wanted to know how it worked. So it worked fine, but I took it apart. When I put it back together, it didn't work anymore. So, but I always had this like, I wanted to take stuff apart and see how it worked. So that was, that sort of transitioned into when my family's computer would break, I would be the one that had to fix it. So then I got to college, at SAU, and I was actually a marketing major. And I looked up how much a marketing major. Really? I didn't make it very far. Anyway, I was a marketing major, and I looked up how much a entry-level marketing major person made in that time. That was a while ago. Okay, that was 2003 or so, and I was like, I think I want to go a different direction. So I decided on IT. So I went to IT. Graduated in 2003, and my first job was actually with Dell Computer. I couldn't find a job around here. Went on countless interviews, and everybody said the same thing, like, you don't have enough experience. Okay, well, I don't really know what that means. So at the end of the interview, I say, what do I got to do? they'd say, go get a certification. Well, that's not really very specific. So I went to a company, I don't remember if you guys remember this company called Tech Skills. Some of the older guys might remember that one. But Tech Skills, so I went there and I said, I need a certification. I said, okay, what certification? I said, I don't know. I said, well, let's start you with A+. I said, that sounds good to me. So I started with A+ back in 2004, maybe, something like that. And ended up at Dell Computer for about a year. Worked there for about a year. To a little computer company in Edwardsville, Illinois, called Sheffield Computer Company. And I was there for about 3 years. I was fairly happy. I was working on customers' computers. You know, you're frustrated, but it was a decent job. But I wanted more. So I started talking to some people that work out at Sky Air Force Base. And they said, well, if you get your CCNA, we'll get you a job. I said, all right, I can do that, no problem. I went and got my CCNA route and switch. I don't remember what year that was. But, and then I got a job with Technology Advancement Group. And I worked out in the Global Network Operations Center at Sky Air Force Base, doing exactly that, supporting the Vista CONUS network globally. So I did that for about 3 years. And as I was working there, people said, hey, you should go over to what everybody called the sandbox, right? It was Afghanistan, Iraq, whatever they were contracting. You should go over there. You should make real good money. I said, that sounds like a great idea. So I quit that, and I got a job at a company called ITT. I spent a year overseas doing that type of work. And I was a network administrator. Up to here, I was a network administrator. And then came back in 2012, and got a job back at the base and worked for SAIC and Lockheed Martin for about 2 years, supporting their voice network. I loved it. I loved voice. It was what I was going to do. I said, I love voice. This is my career. This is what I'm going to do. And I just loved being able to pick up the phone and watch the call traffic and look at Cisco call managers and SIP queue and stuff like that. I loved it. Well, that one thing led to another. As time went on, the team started to dwindle, and I ended up being the only person on the team for a while. So, long story short, I had a colleague that had gone over to Centene, and he said, we got an opening on our security team. And as a network admin, I said, I don't want to do security. I'm out on that. I don't like firewall, I don't like any of that stuff. So he worked on me for a while. Eventually, he said, okay, that sounds like I might be fun. So if you do the numbers there, that's about 10 years in IT before I ever even got into a actually security-focused role at Centene. I spent 4 years doing various security things at Centene. Ended up doing a lot of IAM work. I implemented the MFA solutions and one of the SSO solutions out there. Learned a lot, learned so much. And then at some point, I guess in 2018, Grant was there with me. Grant was the entire time. So when I was at Centene, we had what, 10 people on the security team? And by the time we left, there was 40.
I was an admin. This guy was my the guy I looked up to on the security team, like in my first security role too. So we shared the field of battle together.
Anyway, so 2018 or so, my boss left and went to TechCard. Said, hey, we got some openings. Are you interested? I said, nah, I don't want to do security testing. I don't do vulnerability. I don't want to do any of that stuff. I'm good. Well, she worked on me for a while. We had multiple conversations, and I said, all right, let's do it. That's a different side of security. Because I did all kinds of blue team stuff. I did proxy, I did firewall, I did MFA, I did SSO, I did TLP, I don't know what else can we do there.
Everything. Firewall at one point.
Endpoint. Did everything essentially on the blue team side. And so I never really thought about red. I call it red team, whatever. I never thought about offensive security. So Grant left, and then I followed Grant. TechCard. And that's where I've been ever since. So since then, we've been doing vulnerability assessments, pen testing, compliance, The entire thing, what?
Incident response.
Incident response tabletops. We don't do incident response as an incident response thing. We do incident response thing. So that's kind of where I've been ever since. But yeah, that's kind of right there. And then up here, I put kind of the tools that I like to use when I do my job. I don't know if you guys know these icons. This is Hydra. I use that for brute forcing and things like that. Work Suite is a web testing tool that I use for web testing and brute force and things like that. Flawless is the scanning engine that we use. And Nmap is by far my favorite tool, hands down. I think that's my go-to tool. If these guys here are like, hey, we can't find anything, I'm like, what's Nmap today? Nmap is just a great tool. I love it. That's kind of me. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Does anyone else do any work overseas that like has gotten them into a security role? I don't know. It's something I've always been kind of like playing around with, like, oh, I'll go overseas and do some IT work because a lot of these places they need infrastructure, and I've always just that to me has always been fascinating about your career trajectory because like doing IT in a different country is that's fascinating because you have like you're using that same language of technical skills, but you're trying to install it into a country that doesn't have the infrastructure that the U.S. has. So
yeah, we did, yeah. There's a funny story. So when I was over there, there's a guy who had a notebook, like a pocket notebook, and he had all these passwords. Like that's the big no-no, right? But he lost it, and that was like, I can't even describe that. It was like, oh my god, this contractor. I never saw him again. His name was.
Maybe don't use his name.
yeah.
His first name was Travis, and I never saw that guy again. I don't know what happened.
No longer has a job.
So I don't know if the lesson is if you lose your notepad full of losing passwords, don't tell anybody maybe, or don't lose your notepad full using the passwords.
Hey, he
or,
was using more than one password.
yeah, I don't. It was the exclamation point instead of the @ sign. But,
Let's just hope he doesn't follow Microsoft rules and just never change their password anymore. So
yeah, it was interesting. But anyway, so that's kind of my experience. It's kind of how I got here. I wouldn't say it's a weird trajectory or anything like that, but I never really intended, like I said, at this point in my career, I was all voice. Loved it. I can't describe how much I loved it. And I don't know what clicked in me, but I decided that at this point that I was going to go security. And then I love it too. I think because there's so many ways you can go. You can go into compliance, go into risk, go to red team, you go blue team. But even when you go blue team, you can focus on one technology, focus on IAM, focus on DLP as an entire thing all on its own. So anyway, that was kind of me. I think next is no one.
Hello, everybody.
Any questions for me before I start?
My name is Nolan Crane. My story is substantially shorter. I graduated 2 months ago from Font University. So Font University, it's a really good program. I definitely recommend it. So if you have any younger people thinking about going to college for cybersecurity, definitely recommend Font's program. First 2 years is kind of like a general computer science program, which is a lot of coding and operating system fundamentals, and the last 2 years are definitely security focused. The way I got started or interested, I should say, in security, I would say video games. I was always kind of a nerd. I can't tell you how many hours I spent playing MLB The Show and and playing like Forza Motorsports on the Xbox, and I always try to find glitches and whatever I could to get an unfair advantage, especially in online games. So I guess I kind of started my hacking career and cybersecurity, especially. I just saw the opportunity. I think a few Google searches, and I realized the job market, how much it would expand, and I kind of saw where the puck is going. So I definitely wanted to like insert myself into this vertical. The way I kind of keep current and learn, my three main resources are Try Hack Me. That's really good because it's bite-sized information about different tools and technology. Hack the Box. That is just a hacker's playground. Basically, you VPN into a virtual environment and you just go to town and try to hack the machines. And YouTube, I say like 80% of everything I'm knowing is coming off of YouTube. So whether it's Excel, Python, Mmap, general security, I learned it all basically off of YouTube. I got a couple certs too, Security Plus. That's like a requirement, I guess, for security, and cloud partitioning from AWS. So also, it's kind of like how I saw the opportunity in the security field. I mean, I see the field definitely moving to the cloud, and again, want to try to surf that cloud wave, get ahead of that. I've had 2 internships before I worked here at TechGuard. I worked at Daimler Mobility, where I assisted the global GRC team. And my main role there was making custom applications that would kind of assist in the day-to-day activity for the GRC department. And then TechGuard Security, where I essentially just do what I do now, where I make some one-off tools and do penetration testing. Who's next?
I got a question for you. So like really speaking, like, I know like we work together, but going through these like internships and like, working, in the field, like what you see is like the biggest problem as somebody new, like entering the field? Is it more about like, there's not enough time like that senior people have to like spend with you, or is it more like you're not given enough projects that like really kind of like, what do you think the biggest problem is in the industry right now?
I would say guidance. I see that from the college level. I feel like universities struggle to know like what they should be teaching their students. I was in the same boat where, I don't feel like I was completely armed with what I should know to enter the field. Even at the internship level, I wish, there'd been more guidance, that somebody sat down with me and was like, hey, let's talk about your career, where you're trying to go, and how can we align your goals with the company's goals too. So I think that's definitely.
I think that's like valuable because like a lot of us, we come from kind of a cranky kind of standpoint of like, oh, we've been in infrastructure, now we've moved into security, but it's like, a lot like I know for my standpoint, like I value that infrastructure skill that I have, and growing up, you might not be working on servers or anything like that. So I was just wondering if that's kind of difficult when you're like standing up infrastructure.
Well, it's definitely is because I have to learn it, as I go. I'm learning all these different networking concepts and server concepts. And so I don't have that 10 years of experience working with it. And then trying to apply security to that experience, I have to learn both at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's
So I
definitely.
think that would be really hard as a young person kind of like getting into the field. So anyways, just wondering.
Nolan is one of our newest hires at TechGuard. So anything you guys want to ask her about? The wealth of 2 months of knowledge.
Has anyone else that recently graduated? Yes. Anyone else that kind of into? Yeah. So,
Is Pop good?
Yeah.
Like, are they,
The college itself, I will say, if you're looking for a college experience, no, it's not good for that. But like the program, cybersecurity program, I think it's probably one of the best in the West. And it's ABAT accredited too. Only 1 in 6 schools in the world have that accreditation.
1 of 6?
Yeah. So it's a fairly robust program. I still don't think, I think the whole education system needs to improve. But I mean, for what it is, it's really good.
Hi, I'm Shannon Holdall at TechGuard. I've been here about a year. I'm an IT security risk auditor. So I do a lot of audits against different frameworks and gap analysis and help companies get to where they're trying to get to compliance-wise. If you would have asked me if security was ever in my future when I was a child, I would have said no. But technology, absolutely. I grew up in South Dakota, and we've had Apple computers in the classroom since the 80s. And so I grew up learning on computer games, and I liked them quite a bit. They had us writing code even in 7th grade. So I didn't appreciate my education in South Dakota until I moved away. And then I realized that they got a lot going on technical wise. Black Hills has a lot to do with that in terms of influencing technology up there as well. So I left South Dakota and I went to the military. So my roots are as a military police officer, and I joined the airborne unit out of Fort Bragg, and really liked what I did there. So my roots are more on the physical security side. Definitely like rules. I like structure. So I wasn't quite tall enough to be an MP. So I lifted my heels up just a little bit that day and just barely got in. So not the most intimidating airborne MP you're ever going to see, stature wise. But I found that you can always lend yourself in different ways to contribute to a team. And what I liked is technology. So we got a new plugger. Oh my God, it's our first GPS device. So I was always the one that took, and it's a dry read. Army regulations and manuals are really dry reads. So I was the one who always read the manual and figured out how to work and show people how to work it. I was the one that loaded up the SINGAR radios and make sure all the communications were talking before we rolled out to a field exercise. So that was my thing. I like that. After serving about 7 years, deployed twice. So after 2 deployments, how it works on Fort Bragg is if you've been on a line unit and you've had a couple deployments under your belt, you get what you call a cush assignment or a garrison assignment where you're not out in the field so much. And I got assigned to the provost marshal's office, like the MP station. And I was a crime prevention non-commissioned officer, and I got to play with data. So if anything happened, the police blotter, I put it into a database. And if they asked me a question, how many times has this crime been committed and who was the perpetrator and what was their race and gender, because that was a thing, I would go pull that data out. So I found I really, really liked that kind of stuff. After I found out I was having my 3rd child, I had to make a decision. And so I didn't feel like I would be anything more than a mediocre soldier or a mediocre mom at that point. So I decided to make a choice. So I decided to get out, go to college, and see what I wanted to do, but I wasn't sure. So I took, military does like a career counseling when you get out, and like, what's your personality fit for? And what came up is all earth sciences. I like to be outside. But the one thing but then I looked at like what they made, and I have like a 3rd kid on the way. I'm like, well, that's $19K starting off after 4 years of college. I'm like, oh, I don't think I can do that. But then computer science was the last thing that came up, and I said, absolutely, let's go for that. So I went to SIUE. My degree is in computer management information systems, and I really liked that because it was half business, half technical. And at that point, it was about 2005, it was really hard to get into IT without having a year of experience. So what I did is I did 2 internships with Monsanto. And I ended up, after being at Monsanto for several years, ended up recruiting more interns from SIUE for Monsanto. So they have a really good internship program, but that 2 6-month internship gave me that year that I needed to get my foot in the door at that company. So I was a business analyst there. Does anybody know SAP? So I was an SAP analyst for about several years, did a lot of traveling, really liked the company, but I wanted to move more into management. So I took a chance to move to, it used to be Brown Shoe Company, now it's called Caleres, and they were just implementing SAP. So I took a chance to move and got into management that way. Had to prove myself as an analyst, and then I thought I would be a manager of an SAP module area. They said, no, you're dev manager. And I said, what? I didn't see myself becoming a dev manager. So that was a big learning curve. And so now I'm into, making sure you're bringing safe changes into production, right? And testing. I also did change management. So I had to work with the auditors a lot to make sure we were ready, and had to be SOX compliant, so that I had all the documentation in order and defend, our processes to the auditor. And I found I kind of liked working with the auditors. Most people don't, most people are afraid, but if you have your stuff together, there's nothing to be afraid of. And I really like the compliance side of it. So by doing development management and change management, the way I ended up in security is kind of scary. I complained about security a lot, let's just say that. So sometimes you're anxious, the business is waiting on something, you're wanting to get it in there. And sometimes you get shut down by security. And so that's a little frustrating, especially when you know you had a developer that worked overtime or through a weekend to get that change in. So we started looking at like, what are the processes that are missing? Why is security not in the beginning of the process, and did some changes so that when we have a change request, that we sit down, security has a seat at the table, right? Security knows what's going on. They're not blindsided just before it goes into production and shuts it down. So we had to work together. Because I was tired of seeing things not get in, but there was some processes that were broken, and once they were put in place, it was much better. But I ended up managing the security team with no security training. So that was another learning curve. So I had to just kind of learn through practical exercise, practical experience and it was a lot to take in. So taking I did take a CISP course at SLU, and that helped. I wish I would have taken that as soon as I got in there to understand some stuff a little bit better. But I can tell you, by moving to security later in my career, my eyes were open in terms of the importance of the processes that have to be in place, especially for compliance. Things I just took for granted, or move a product to production. I thought, oh, I forgot to create a security role for that. Oops, no big deal. No, it is a big deal. And I realized that, well, there's a lot of things I've done wrong. So it was definitely a change of an attitude and just an eye-opening process to why there are rules, why there are structures, and why compliance is so important. Because if we don't meet SOX, if we don't meet PCI, then we can't do business, right? So I like working with the auditors. I especially like the PCI auditors, and we had a variety of them of all different sorts. And so what I would do is help prepare our company, our IT department, collect the evidence and speak to the auditor on the behalf of the people in the processes. That way they'd only have to go to them and interrupt them if I couldn't answer that question. So that was where I got that passion for compliance, because it's all about rules and structure. And I show up there, that is the MP regimental insignia, to assist, protect, and defend. And I find a lot of similarities, especially coming to TechGuard. When I left Glarus, I came to TechGuard, and now I do this for other companies and help them get prepared as well. And I kind of feel like I'm kind of back to my roots, where you're helping them. You always assess physical security as well. And I like the fact that I like to do mentorship, right? So I help the companies, well, here's where you're at, here's where you really need to be, and here's what you need to think about to even improve. Even though you're passing, here's some ways to improve what you're doing. And that makes me feel like there's a little bit of a sense of reward. Sometimes when you're working security for a company, you don't always feel that reward. But when you're helping someone and giving advice, there's a little bit more reward coming back at you. So that's kind of my story. Any questions on how I got to where I'm at?
I'll have a question.
Yes.
I'm not gonna let you escape. I guess I'm gonna be the firing panel here. So one of the problems that I've always seen is like basically the combativeness of dev teams towards security. Mm-hmm. And you transitioned from a dev manager to a security manager, right? Mm-hmm. How did that transition happen? Like, did you ever have to work with your dev teams and basically like was it easy? Was it better because you were actually you were kind of like helping the devs manage and then you moved over? You can relate. So we had two different sides of dev. So I was the wholesale dev manager and there's a retail dev manager. Those are two different animals, two different coding environments. So I think as security manager, working with the other side of the fence, the way Caleris was structured, I empathize. I know where you're going. I understand that this may be a little bit painful, but this is why. And I think what wasn't explained well to me when I was dev manager and change manager myself was the why was missing. And that's where I think security sometimes falls down in companies where the why doesn't come across so much, where I didn't get the why. I didn't know until I moved into that position that there was a why. I just wasn't aware of it.
What
So
methodology were you guys using?
for
Development, waterfall, agile.
SAP is definitely a waterfall. It's very much a controlled production. So on the retail side, that's more agile. So, yeah, so two different, and it's still kind of like that.
Where do you see the biggest struggles that companies have in going through your everyday audits that you have in TechGuard?
I see a lot of similarities across companies where I think there's some commonalities where they aren't doing certain things well. And no matter what the framework is, logging is a big problem. Getting your logs, getting them centralized, being able to pull useful data from your logs quickly, especially in an incident response. It's required, centralization is required for more than one framework. That's not always there. Risk assessments, people are not doing them. Or they don't understand what really a risk assessment is and how that should drive it. It's not just assess, like here's a controls audit. Here's what I'm supposed to be doing. I missed a few. That's my risk assessment. No, that is not your risk assessment. Risk assessments are something else. And it's required to do it annually for multiple frameworks. But it's just not something that people are doing annually. Unless they have a compliance mandate, they're really not looking at it. And if they are, they're looking at it only for the scope of that compliance, whatever that scope is. They're not looking at it holistically for a company and across security, across all the different areas of the business. So those are two areas I see. People do not do role-based access control very well, as they have a lot of overprivilege. So we do a lot of evidence-based audits. So if they say, yeah, we do it, here's our policy. Well, let's log into Azure and show me your global admins. And there's like everybody in the world is in there. I'm like, well, you can't say you're least privileged at this point, right? There's a lot of violations there, and that has a lot of security concerns, because if you get one of these privileged people's access, you can do a lot of damage. And I see a lot of companies still not turning on MFA as well, which seems kind of like, why not? But it's a big process for some companies, and they're just not quite there yet. I think with all the recency of all the events going on, people need to start turning it on. If they don't have it, at least understand why they need it. So single sign-on is great. Not a lot of companies use it. I'm a big fan of it, but that's not always there either. So some of the companies we audit are smaller companies, and it's hard to digest. Here's a big compliance mandate. Here's 130 things I have to do, and I'm just a small company. I only have a 4-person IT company, and bridging that gap is something that that's where I enjoy. Like, okay, here's what do you have? What are you doing? And this is how you can meet it. Or let me break that control down into it's not as big as what you think it is. I really enjoy doing that for companies. So right now, I am a registered practitioner for CMMC, so that is coming. So we've had a lot of interest now in NIST 800-171. If you do any sort of government work, they're starting to enforce it beyond just a self-attestation. You actually have to write in a score, and a lot of people realize they don't understand what the controls mean. Or they just go, yeah, we're compliant. No, not really. My personal goal is to be a certified assessor for CMMC if we move that way as a company, which is where we're likely heading. And so I'm kind of looking forward to the changes because for me, being former military, helping to secure our military supply chain is really important for me. So I have that added value of that I'm still serving, but in a different way.
Very good. Hey, do you want to stand over there? Yeah. It's tough to hear.
I'm good.
Thanks, man.
So my name is Matt Reck. I've been with TechGuard for about a year now, and as with Nolan, I'm fairly new. I just graduated in 2020, which didn't really feel like a graduation. Just kind of got thrown out and dealt with because of the pandemic. But it was what it was. How I became interested in the IT security world only started about 4 years ago, my freshman year of college. Up until about halfway through my freshman year of college, I was pretty much going down the business route and going to do sports management as my career choice. And it turned out that going to one little extra credit math event kind of changed that, and I was not really intending on listening. I was just going to go and just get my extra credit, get a good grade in class, and move on. But I was listening to one of our former graduates at Fompon who works for Boeing, and what he was talking about just sounded super interesting to me and got me at least interested enough to test out the Intro to Cybersecurity course, which I did the following spring semester, and I took and enjoyed the capture the flags, doing the terminal work and learning how things work within computers. Because growing up, I always liked working in technology. Me and Nolan probably grew up in the generation similar to now that we always had a piece of technology in our hand, from iPods to iPhones to computers and all those kind of things. And it kind of snowball effect and turned into something that I really enjoyed once freshman year of college came, and I didn't really look back after that. But other than school, outside of school, my self-study continuing learning, I do Hack the Box and try Hack Me's as well. Blogs and articles and keeping up on those things, and then trying to attend all the summits and things that you can right now while they're either virtual or going to be going back to in person. My formal education, I did go to Fompon with Nolan. I graduated 1 year with him. We were partners on a lot of projects because our school is not very big, so we worked together prior to working at TechGuard as well. I graduated with a bachelor's degree in cybersecurity with a minor in computer science. And previously to Fompon, I had no computer experience at all. They taught me everything I know, and they did a very good job doing it. I didn't take any computer classes in high school or any formal education before I got there. And then while I was at Fompon, I did 3 internships. I did one with Gray Bar Electric Company over in Maryland Heights, just directly under the information security team, doing some incident response stuff, digital forensics, and kind of just day-to-day security operations, some auditing stuff there as well. And then I went to Barnes Jewish BJC Healthcare here in St. Louis again, doing kind of rotating through teams, through their incident response team, their vulnerability management team, their threat intelligence team, GRC team, security engineering team, identity management team. And that kind of kept me busy up until the pandemic hit, and then was working from home, kind of doing some simple projects. And then eventually they had to cut us loose because they didn't need the interns at that point. And then I picked up an internship at TechGuard over the summer, and then that turned full-time shortly after there. And I've been at TechGuard ever since, working, doing anything from penetration tests to social engineering to physical pen tests, which there's nothing like committing a crime legally. So if you ever get a chance, I'd do it. But doing all those kind of things on a day-to-day basis. And one of the biggest things I've learned from cybersecurity, and ever since I picked it up, is you never stop learning, which is one of the, I think, the best parts about this field, is that you're never going to stop learning, and it's never stagnant, where I feel like looking at some other jobs it could have, and you might feel like you're in the repetition thing, but like I think every day, whether it's just studying something new, it's going to change in the short-term near future, and you're always going to be learning something new. And then my certification, so far I only have the Security Plus, which isn't much, but I'm only 1 year out, and I'm working on some new ones here to get hopefully soon in the near future. But it's kind of my story. It's pretty short compared to everybody else. But if you have any other questions, feel free to ask.
You work in TechGuard, do you have to go to SIUE or Fompon? I was waiting to see the next slide.
No. That's false. We did have another intern that I worked with at BJC. He went to Marymount.
Okay.
So just wait. It's one of those 3 schools.
I'm not sure.
But yeah, any other questions or anything?
Yeah.
No.
Do either of you have any interaction with the Gateway Higher Ed Cybersecurity Disorder?
Yeah.
I do not.
I have, it's limited. So I remember at Daimler, one of my coworkers was actually assisting setting that up.
Okay. Just wondering.
Yeah, you might have participated a little bit as like classmates, but you know.
Would that be a suggestion from you?
So their charter is something that you commented on, to bridge the gap between higher ed education and the private sector.
Oh yeah.
Who changes tools every 3 minutes.
Yeah, because
But expects people to teach the tools. And so they started right when I graduated from school. And one of the things I did in a year, I was asked, what do you wish you would have learned in school? Right? Straight up. What do you, and I was like, I've been in cybersecurity 4.5 minutes. I don't know.
Yeah.
But in a year, I reflected for like a month, and I wrote them a 2-page letter.
Yeah.
Of what I thought would have been beneficial. I spent, Keisha and I were in a SOC over Spectrum, and I spent a year drowning in malware alerts. And so I wrote them, like, here's what I think would have been beneficial. You know, like if you'd have made us build a cloud network from scratch, and then next semester taught us to attack it, and then the following semester taught us to defend it. I think that would have been wildly beneficial. Right. But I wrote a whole, you know, and I think for them, I know they took that letter to the board of directors. And I think the more feedback they can get from new grads, the better information they can take to the provosts and the deans who are writing the syllabuses and the programs that are building the next generation. So to me, I didn't know that an entry-level job in cybersecurity required 10 years of experience. Top secret. And I was very lucky to pick up at Spectrum 3 months after graduation and almost 50 years old. So I think that feedback loop between the private sector and the education is really important. And as recent grads from a university that is a member, your feedback will have a little more clout too. So I just think it's valuable.
No, and I'd say too, I mean, as an intern, not having any experience, I'd say the big thing you get in school is the knowledge, but not the practical experience. So like, I mean, even for our own reasons, like for future internship programs or anything you guys might have, I was like, the assumption is I just assume they know nothing about the tools you're going to use and they're going to need groundwork from the up, because I think I was handed a sim on like day 3 of my gray bar internship, and I was like, I have no idea what this is. I know what it does, but I have no idea how to use it or what, and I don't want to, we don't want to break it because the pressure's on us. You know, it's live, don't break it. Things will happen if you break it. And we go, oh, I don't want to touch it then. But yeah, those, I mean, I would agree with that, because I would say the biggest thing we lack is practical tool experience, because a lot of these companies don't sell it to colleges at a discount or anything like that, or let them use like a free something to learn it in that time frame. But hand it over to Grant here, and you can go over
Alrighty.
his experiences.
Yeah, so you want something a little bit like, you know, in left field, that's probably me, because, so I don't know, do you guys remember like TI-82s and TI-85s calculator? Well, that's actually how I began my IT career. I used to program little calculator games, and then, you know, we got a computer, one thing led to another. I got a C++ book, and I'm sure you guys know AOL. You know, I got my first AOL CD and made a little, I don't know if you guys remember Punters, where basically it's just basically a DOS attack to instant messages, and it'll DOS it so fast that it'll just bring the whole session down. So I traded that to somebody else in a dark, shady chat room on there, and they gave me a tool and basically gave me this tool that gave me guide access. So I used it and started tossing people, and then AOL found out and banned me. So I got a letter that I could no longer use AOL. So I'm like, of course, my parents ground me from the internet, and I'm like, all right, well, what can I do? Luckily, my dad had the foresight to realize that I was good in art. So like, he gave me my first version of like Adobe Illustrator, and then of course I started working on that. And then I kind of went a different route, because like I went into school into a graphic design degree. So, and it was kind of funny, because then I diverged and started making fake IDs, of course, to like, you know, try to pay for my beer money too. So, you know, like everything that they gave me, I always like, you know, found a way to manipulate it and kind of like, you know, capitalize on it. So one thing led to another. I went to UNLV out in Las Vegas, and then I graduated in 2009. So I was like the heart of the recession. You know, I'm like, oh, I got this art degree. I'm ready to learn, and there was no jobs. So I'm like, well, what do I do? Like everybody else, I'm like, well, I got to pay my student loan somehow. So I'm going to go ahead and go into IT. So I spent probably the, you know, 2.5 years, you know, this is around like 2011, 2012. in a little 8x8 room right here on 210 Tucker and Walnut, where the big pipes come into the city, all the internet, just doing green screens, like releasing AS400 jobs. I was working in a knock. I was calling engineers at night, waking them up. You know, they were getting pissed off at me, and I'm like, you know, through that, you develop a thick skin when you wake up somebody at night. You have to like figure out how to gracefully do it and provide them the information they have to do their job. Because otherwise they're gonna be like, this is my issue. Hang on, click. And then whose issue it is? Mine. Call the next guy, you know? So that's kind of how I started in a NOC, Network Operations Center. And honestly, it was one of the most valuable points in my career because I learned about the entire architecture. I learned about everything, how applications exist, how web servers exist. I had bosses that like, you know, they thought it was funny that I was this art major coming in working in IT. And I'm like, oh, I want to work on a server. So of course, what do? They give me an IP and a user login. And I'm like, okay, what do I do with this? Where's the server? Where's the GUI? And of course, like I didn't even realize it was a Linux server. I didn't even have like sudo access. So I'm like, okay, what do I do? So I spent a lot of time just like Googling it and trying to figure out how to make that work. And eventually I learned the web stack. I learned how to actually like make a LAMP server, and I took my notes by using bash scripts. So I was able to kind of like build these applications from the ground up by working in like, you know, an overnight office. So a lot of these things kind of, they steamrolled together. You know, then I was able to just like, you know, work on my certs. And from there, I moved into Centene, and kind of where I met Nate, I was able to, you know, get a knock there and then further expand into security. And one of the things that my old VP at Connectria told me in the very beginning, he said, if you don't make a choice on where your career is going to go, whether you're going to be database, whether you're going to be Linux, whether you're going to be Windows, you're going to eventually end up in security. And it's funny because he was right. Like, because you eventually learn about everything and you're able to actually pull all those resources together, and you kind of don't just see things linearly anymore as like, okay, when you're in IT, you see, okay, I have a project, I want to get to a finish line, and then that will make the company money, make it more profitable, increase availability. Like you kind of see it through a whole, you know, you see everything else but that linear path. And that's kind of how I define security, just how it works in general. And I've always liked that. I've always liked thinking like asymmetrically about problems. So then I got into the IT, and I put these up here because like when people get into IT, they don't realize that this is really the important part about IT security. You know, it's not about like, you know, the tools that you might use. And I know that it is at one level, it's about the tools, but it's about the infrastructure that you use to mimic everybody else's environment. You use to, you know, figure out how to create your own environment. So you can use, you know, like a suite of servers to launch attacks out of, and then, you know, script into Office 365 to make it look like, you know, it's actually a realistic attack. And putting it all together, I've used my graphic design background in order to create very good forgeries of things. And that's one of the things that I kind of realized a little bit later, like, you know, that graphic design and web design field actually paid off because I'm pretty good at making things look legitimate. So after I went through all my infrastructure years at Centene, I moved into, you know, the red team because I find it the most creative part of IT. You know, a lot of times, you know, it's just kind of like you're trudging through all these like infrastructure problems. But like security is just a different look. You know, you're not looking at the finished product. You're looking at how to get around that finished product and attack. So that's one of the things I really enjoy about it. You know, I just have some stuff here. Like, this is all kind of, a lot of times you want to start with like the basic certs and CompTIA, and then you kind of move it. You have some like, you know, various technology certs. Mid-years, probably CISSP. CMMC, I'm kind of like working with Shannon to kind of go through that. I'm working on my OSCP right now, but certs actually helped me augment the skills that I don't have as a base level for an IT degree. you don't need an IT degree. This is just how I feel, because with the experience and learning how to fix things, all you really got to do is be interested. You got to be interested in learning up how to set up an Arduino to, you know, make some sort of function happen, or to set up a Raspberry Pi at home. It's the constant learning part of IT that really makes good security practitioners, because then you want to protect your own stuff too. So yeah, that's kind of just my story. I kind of work. Oh yeah, I totally forgot. So one of the things like that I was often asked was like, I really enjoy the physical penetration test part of it, and like the whole social engineering. And I think it's one of the biggest threat vectors that can be exploited right now. A lot of companies are putting everything into money, into like technology services to stand up, secure their perimeter. But like, you know, you hack the human, you get in. One of the things that I've been asked is like, how do you practice that? And it's kind of funny because I've learned that some of the things that I do in my spare time is actually, it's helpful for that. So I play like Dungeons and Dragons, and it's one of those things where I can put myself into an actual persona and be that persona. And then when you're actually in the field and you're working through things, you can actually you can become that person. So it's a good way to practice it without like, you know, being too like sociopathic, you know, it's like, you can kind of like play with it too. So yeah, well, I'm saying it's, a lot of people ask that because, you know, that's one of those things that's really hard. Like, especially when you go into a presentation and you're saying, look, I used empathy to manipulate these 3 people to give me information. Like that takes a toll on somebody. Like no matter who it is, you know, that person has a possibility in getting fired. There was one instance, I was actually like out of the country, and it was late at night, you know, I'm knocking on the door. I'm like, I forgot my badge, please, I need to get in the building. And it was just a janitor, you know, and like, she opens the door, she's like, I'm not supposed to let you in. I'm like, please, it'll be really quick. Of course, she lets me in. You know, I walk down the hall and I just act like I knew where I was going, ducked in a little room, you know, just did my business. And as I'm coming out, she's like, well, I can sense in her that she knows she did something wrong. She's like, I probably need to find your badge. So I'm like, I'm trying to cover myself. Like, I couldn't find it, blah, blah, as I'm trying to like sneak away to the exit because, you know, it's in a different country. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to, you know, throw in another country jail. So I'm sneaking toward the exit. And then she stopped and she's like, I really need to see your badge. And I'm like, I don't have it. And at that point, I saw the look of fear in her eyes, like she was going to lose her job. And I just walked out the door. But something like that actually really impacts you. You have to prepare yourself for those kind of situations because you are actually doing devious actions. So you have to like steel yourself into that you're doing it for the good, because, you know, if it's not you, it's going to be someone who's actually going to be causing legitimate harm, which is even worse. So I always ride on like, which is worse. And I do a lot of kind of like moral balance. You know, is it worse that, you know, somebody's disabled brother might have their entire, you know, monetary supply that they're using to like, you know, live in the future on, just stolen from them? Or is it worse that I use a scenario like that where I'm basically calling on behalf of my disabled brother in an effort to get into their bank account? I'm glad I'm doing it because I know when to say no, and I know when to stop it. Other people can't. So it's that moral kind of area that I really enjoy, but I also know that it comes at a price. So anyways, that's all I got. Any questions for anybody else? Cool.
For the record, that country was Canada.
It was Canada. It was Toronto, which is like the most American city in Canada.
Probably the nicest prison system you've ever been in.
Yeah, but still, I didn't want to deal with the Mounties up there.
He's the most polite person.
Right, for sure.
Yeah. All right. I don't know.
All right, everybody. So my name's Adam Voss. I am one of the greener
ones on the team too. I have a little bit of a different background than everybody else as well. I graduated like high school in 2012 to give everybody reference for about my age. So I'm the kid that really grew up at the start of technology, you know, the N64, the Super Nintendo, all of that. Those were the first gaming systems that were ever out. If you ever talk to my mom or my grandparents, they tell you couldn't pull me away from them. I was trying to create Game Shark before Game Shark was a thing for N64 games. My grandpa, like the majority of our pictures when I was younger, is me sitting on his lap, trying to teach him how to use the computer. I originally did not start out kind of like Matt. I've always had a thing for technology, but like when I went through high school, right, I tried to ask if there were any computer software, computer programming, computer-backed clubs that we could join. I went to a public school here in St. Louis, and it wasn't a thing. You know, largely we hadn't gotten to the point to where security was what it is today. Ransomware attacks weren't happening the way that they are. People weren't knowing or were unknowing of vulnerabilities. You know, really everybody thought like, you know, creating cheats on your video game was about the worst thing that could happen. You flash forward a couple of years, I went to Mizzou for a little bit, enjoyed myself there, did not stay focused. Part of it being because I was a finance major, didn't have the passion. When I was younger, like another thing that my grandparents and my mom, everybody always instilled in me was you got to be passionate about what you do, right? You can't just wake up every single day and go to your job and just get through it without enjoying it to some bit. And when I got to my finance internship, I said, I just can't do this. I was selling life insurance to people. And I just never felt right. It didn't feel like my thing. So I took a step back for about 6 months, moved back home. And my mom was actually a Maryville graduate. She was a nurse, and they happened to have a segment about cybersecurity, right? So this is 3 years ago now when I see this article. Cybersecurity is starting to become very prevalent in society. People are starting to take it more serious, and you start looking at the starting pay for a job and, you know, where they're projecting jobs to be over the next 20 years. And this is something that just has me interested. So I went to Maryville. I graduated about a year and a half ago now. While I was there, I worked in Maryville's Cybersecurity Fusion Center doing like vulnerability assessment management and tests for like non-for-profits, schools in the surrounding area. Anybody that basically would help us. Fun fact about Maryville, the year I was there, when the PGA Tour came here for Belle Reve, Maryville CFC was actually the headquarters that the FBI ran all of the surveillance out of and all of the security detail. So it was a pretty cool experience for us because that not only does the FBI come in, but the FBI worked with us as a university to kind of teach us, you know, the ins and outs, talk to us about career paths, while also seeing, you know, some high level work for what they could show us. You know, so I go through there for a little bit. I get a job at Centene. I worked help desk. So I've done this from the bottom up. I worked the grunt job. I worked from 5 a.m. to 12 there, and then went to school, and then I worked for my uncles. But, you know, like I was saying before, getting your passion for something, right? While I was at school and while I was going through this was something that just always interests me. You know, I'm listening to podcasts all the time. YouTube is my best friend. And if it's not YouTube, then, you know, it's any of those podcasts you see down there. I love Black Hills Security. You know, they service the top 50 companies in the United States. They basically just talk for hours and hours and hours about what they do, how they do it. And I think it's great. I follow Network Chuck, if anybody's familiar with him and his work. I like that. I like David Bombal a lot. Him and Neil, the guy that he works with, they've done a really good job at explaining, you know, how do you get into it? Because this job isn't easy by any means. There's a lot to wrap your head around. There's a lot when it comes to finding vulnerabilities. And so I've, you know, between that and school, it like really helped start me out and where I'm at today. And so, yeah, those are just a little bit about me. I feel like we've heard a lot about us, a lot about what we do. My job at TechGuard, obviously, is I work as a technician. I do all of our engagements. And then I double up a little bit on the sales side too. So, you know, with that in mind, I was gonna ask everybody, we're obviously here for security reasons or one way or another. So, you know, like what is you guys in your roles at your companies, do you guys see your gaps and problems that bring you in today that, you know, you want to discuss or, you know, or looking maybe for some insight on? You know, I could probably talk about myself for forever, but I feel like that's far less interesting than maybe what some of you guys have.
Well, I noticed that you guys were talking about, you guys both go to charter or you work at charter? Did. Okay.
Yeah.
Is that kind of like one of those things, did they have a decent SOC there that was like staffed with a good hierarchy of like skill levels?
I mean, I'm not gonna say that, I shouldn't say that, it's recorded. I would think that it was entry level, of course, but there was only one SOC, so it was only one tier. So it was like the front line of defense for everything, like anywhere from malware to phishing, to like the DDoS attack. Like, I mean, it literally just went up the chain. So I would think that it would have definitely need to be more staffed for sure. So we could have, and then more testing. Like, I know that you guys had talked about doing like a lot of tabletop exercises. Now, not to say that my previous company was foreign to that. It's just that having that stimulation on a constant basis that would help develop your employees in a different manner, you know, so you can be prepared.
Yeah, have more of kind of like a hierarchy of just, you know, hey, you're bringing someone in, this is how you do a regular thing. But maybe you have like a leadership where they're kind of, you know, orchestrating these low risk scenarios.
And having
trimming.
QA too, because of course having someone, you can hire a full staff of folks, but who's to say that like everyone's gonna do things, and that was something that me and Tom definitely struggle with. Like everyone had their own way of doing it, so.
Right, and in the heat of the moment, right? Like,
Yeah.
are we prepared to act when it happens? It's something I feel like we hear a lot of, especially now. I mean, when you're talking about everything that's going on in the world, right? Like Cassia has their breach today with a supply chain attack. You have the SolarWind incident. Microsoft has had their issues. There are a lot of people. I mean, granted, like I said, I've only been here for about a year and a half. You hear everybody talk, but it feels like, especially now, everybody's getting concerned. You know, universities are really starting to call and ask, you know, especially IR tabletops. So like, you know, what if, right? Like, it's no longer a time of, this isn't going to happen to us, right? It's almost more of a win. And it's if, right? And if we're there, how are we going to handle these situations? You really don't know until you kind of, you know, test out the waters, right? So.
I thought, I'm trying to be sure. I think the industry is really immature. And like I have a friend who's a nurse. She graduated college, and the company who hired her knew exactly what to do. They knew how to train her up. They knew how to take their skill set and bring it to proficiency. They knew exactly what to do with it. And I have friends who are doctors, and they completed the residencies the same thing. Structural engineers, and I don't think this industry knows how to do that yet.
But you have to ask yourself exactly why that is, and there is a really specific reason.
I'd like to hear your thoughts, because I don't know that there's one. But
there's
I'm
one
interested.
There's one.
What's the thought?
A nurse has one thing they deal with, the human body. A doctor has one thing they deal with, the human body.
Right.
Cybersecurity, we're dealing not only with a lot of different things, we're dealing with different industries that have very specific requirements, and possibly most importantly, legacy things that we have been dragging around since the 1980s, mainframes.
Sure, absolutely.
That are making it impossible to say you're focused, which this is the gap that I see in educational cybersecurity. No offense to anybody sitting in this room, I've seen realtors pass a CISP. It's a trivia contest. You don't actually need to know anything about a computer to pass a CISP. You can memorize all the details you need about encryption and SSL, everything else to pass a test. We rely on education that's teaching details, trivia. What can you do? I'm kind of generally asking, but pointing at some of the newbies in particular. I work for the utility industry. I'm at Emory, and we do critical infrastructure. I doubt there's anybody else in this room that knows a tenth of what I know about PLCs. And I know nothing. Honestly, compared to the engineers that design and implement those over the course of a decade, I know nothing. I know how to spell it, I know what it does, I've done a little programming as a cyber guy, but I know nothing. That's the gap. That's the gap that we can't easily address. And education is not doing the job because traditional college coursework is trivial. It's learning facts. Applying that, particularly in the diversity, you know, one of the things that struck me, and again, I am not criticizing at all, you guys are all brilliant, is every one of you guys speaking up there, well, with the exception of you, because you're coming out of audit and compliance. So you have a very different mindset than these guys. And I love audit and compliance. They're my attack dogs. They're the best. But every one of you spoke as if it was an attack. It was all offensive. It was, how do I get in? How do I penetrate? How do I look at it? Your terminology, how you focused on it, which is a very specific thing, a very useful thing. But when it comes to the other side of that line of defending, it's not actually useful. Because you don't understand the details of what you're attacking and why things are the way they are and why they have to be that way. And that varies across every business, every industry, across the scope and the platforms that you have deployed. You know, if you're born in the cloud, look at Netflix, look at Capital One, where their entire operation stack is in AWS. That's actually pretty simple. All things considered, that's simple. Now go to a brick and mortar retail operation that's been doing POS stuff for 30 years and has this huge embedded costly infrastructure. That's way more complicated. So I'll shut up now, but that's my 2 cents.
So I'll add one thing because, and Shannon, right?
Yes.
And I really appreciated your talk. I was in IT security and IT auditing, and here's what I found, and hopefully, I don't know if you found it or not, but what annoyed me about IT security auditing, and I worked for one of the big 4 for 8 years,
Gotcha.
did the same damn program year after year after year. They never looked for anything new. So how do you guys take, or how are you guys taking and gonna do that? Because, you know, I can go into Centene, and quite frankly, I audited Centene. And we use the same audit program every year. And I thought, this isn't auditing, this is just, oh, are you meeting the minimum standard, right? And there are many other companies that I did the same thing for here in St. Louis and around the country. I'm thinking, is this really auditing? So I'd love to hear from you. Do you think auditors now are really doing that?
I can't speak for other people and their demeanors. Yes, I do believe for a lot of people and companies, it's very much a check the box sort of activity. But personally, I like to look at things a little bit more holistically. So if you're being audited for this area, this enclave of your business for this framework, well, what else do you have? And so one of the things we look at is, well, hey, you also have to be compliant with HIPAA in this area as well. But this centralized, you know, let's say you're running, you know, Azure Active Directory, that applies to multiple areas, right? So, hey, what you're doing works for this, but it's not going to work for this area of your business. But that's more of our recommendation. We'll still audit against what the scope is, but we like to do recommendations of where you might be falling down in other areas as well.
Well, one thing that struck me about something you said, struck me very deeply, was the word holistic. And we rarely have the capability to really approach any kind of holistically. We tend to break things up in chunks. We're IT guys, right? We program. You do this subroutine, you do the next subroutine. That's literally how we've been taught to behave since the 1970s. So it's that holistic approach is it's expensive, it's painful, it's difficult, it's hard to separate out your legacy past and all of the garbage and technical debt that drags into it. But that's what we need to focus on because nothing lives in a vacuum.
I kind of want to just like jump off of kind of how you were relating to kind of the nursing field is how it relates to IT. And it's like, I see the same thing because, you know, it's not really that we're like on the same level of nurses. We're almost like pathologists. You know, we're actually looking at how these vulnerabilities affects that entire holistic system. And we're trying to basically use like manipulation and like attack the whole system along with defend it
at the same time. Like, you know, I was recently at a big like airplane manufacturer, like, and they had some of these same issues where they have this IT security program and they don't know how the airplane PLCs exist. They're just saying, okay, every time I run this, I bring this down. You need to kind of tell me why it's bringing it down. But a lot of them, like a lot of the new people, they don't realize that, you know, you bombard connections and fill up a state table, like that's going to send these sort of like logical controllers, you know, wonky, and that will spread and basically bring down other parts of the system. And it's like, a lot of them don't have that engineering principle that they can apply to security at the same time. So it's difficult to actually like see that cross breeding in the system. So I almost see like as someone in security, we need to be part of the guild system. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Agile and the guild methodology, where you have these Agile teams in development, and within these teams, you have a security practitioner that is embedded inside of a development team that knows about security, but also knows about development too. And it's like, as you know, an IT security platform, we have to teach these people, we have to teach these developers, these engineers about security practices, and then release them and let them do the work for us, because that's just how we're going to survive. You know, we have to basically be that small, isolated group, and then just make sure that everything is built in. And I think the government with CMMC, they're building that in too, because, you know, security is built on top, or everything else is built on top of security. I see that at least the government kind of understands that too, but I think we need to really kind of spread the infection, you know, through every company we deal with. You know?
Well, you know, one other thing that struck me in the discussion tonight is the fact that you said it, and I've heard other people say it, it's like it's us against the world, but not only that, one of the things that I find in people I talk to in the street is, you know, businesses are huge on automation. Let's automate processes. Let's recover man hours by making sure we convert these PDFs. Why are we not automating security? You know, to give you a really clear example, Palo Alto Networks, next generation firewall, top right quadrant, they don't have a 24/7 SOC. They have 8 hours. The rest of the time it's all automated. They do not have 3 shifts. Why do we not think about that? Why do corporations not place more emphasis on that sort of automation? If I was building a company, if I was a CEO, I told them to automate cyber guys first. Less mistakes, consistency, process, all of that comes with it. You know, we try to do all this manually, I think, and that's partially our nature. We want to tinker, right? Every one of you guys stood up and said, I like touching things. I want to feel it. You know, and we do that. We want to build, we want to understand, but ultimately we're not trying to make it easier. We're just repeating that over and over and over, which is great for the bill rate. But
yeah. We almost need to teach the people that we're working for how to write their own exploits and automate it in order to exploit themselves. So, I mean, I think that's a big problem too.
Work smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
I think the big problem, so you mentioned in the aviation company, I suspect I've worked at others suspect aviation company. Now some people undisclosed aviation company. And they're like, where was it, St. Louis? I think, and you brought up tech debt, and I think one of the biggest thing also is people debt. It sounds kind of morbid, but
those two go in.
yeah. So like when I worked at undisclosed aviation company, we had like a bunch of amazing people. We had a bunch of amazing process set up, but the management wanted us to go and run like 5 minutes. The problem is that the management was like super broken.
Right.
And then the two brothers like 7 years old, computers. Last time we saw something about the internet was receipts, like a DVD movie like and yeah, it's like we have all these processes, but we can't use them exactly. And also with automation, like, they don't know automation exists. They just see the numbers, right? That's most of our companies.
I agree with you, but I disagree with you because I'm in the ERP business. You're Hammer, right? You guys are re-implementing Oracle in the cloud right now, or getting ready to.
Sure we are.
I know. I applied for the job, I didn't get it. But they have all that. Infor has all of that. SAP has all of that, where you can do exactly what you just said. And you're absolutely right. It's the people that are at a certain level that can't see the advantage of doing it.
I would make the argument that it can be people at every level.
You're absolutely right.
We all get
trust
into
me.
a run. If you're a network guy, everything
Yeah.
comes down to network.
I'm gonna
If
lose
you're a
my
server
job
guy,
because you did this. You're right.
I've done it and it's successful, and I've done it this way for X number of years, which honestly can be 6 months to 40. And people behave that way because it's worked.
Yeah.
It's always worked,
Right.
until it doesn't.
Yeah.
That one would be.
Until the baby stick around, because you know numbers make a little bit.
It's cheaper, it's not always better.
I guess another thing, it's like a lot of times, going and doing these audits, it's like a lot of companies don't have processes in place. And I think that's like the first step of automation. If you can program people through a process, you can write a script and actually take that module and automate it. So it's like you gotta have these processes first, then you can move to that next level of automation. Some of these small companies can't do it.
But ask yourself why? Why won't Jack the engineer write down this process?
He's
Time of day too,
He doesn't want to lose his job. He wants to be the most valuable guy in the room. He wants to feel the most long time. I think one of the other things that we talk about audit and compliance, one of the things that I see, and this is not a jab at anybody again, but having the capability to do something is enough to check the box versus actually having done it. And that is a very prevalent failure that I see in audit. Can you do it? Yeah, okay, good.
Is it a fault and I roll on? No.
But we could if we wanted to.
And that's what I love having Grant on these calls because so a lot of times we use a team approach, right? And to take different areas and domains we're more comfortable. And sometimes we're, if you're using an evidence-based approach, it's not just tell me what you do, don't just show me the policy, show me that you're doing it. So sometimes, especially with COVID, there's a lot of remote audits going on. So it's a screen share where they share their screen. And Grant is an expert at, okay, click there, go there, show me this, show me that, and can get right into the crux of, oh, you didn't even configure this, right? So it's kind of interesting. And a lot of times they don't even realize they just missed that. Right. So that's always it's a useful catch to them sometimes to open their eyes that they had it. They're just not using it correctly. So, and then I feel like that's a win because there's something we could have helped prevent. Right.
And knowing that too, it's interesting. Like we can actually take that because a lot of times people stand up a web proxy or some sort of email proxy and they'll just do content filtering based on categories. Well, I know because we stood stuff like that up really quick. Now, all I have to do is go to the URL, find out what categories are allowed, go to an expired domain, match that, and now I can get right through their sandbox infrastructure. So it's like using those kind of fallbacks and actually showcasing that, look, this is what we can do because you didn't set it up properly. Like I think is where I came from and how I got to the red team side because it was frustrating working at a big company.
Well, yeah, properly, but you didn't go all the way,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
There's another step that was there.
Mhm.
Oftentimes,
It does. It all comes down to risk and money. So
And that's where sometimes I think when you're talking to the IT person, or the couple of the IT people, especially on an audit, where this is all they have to work with. And there's no way they're going to meet that with the tools that they have. So sometimes by writing that, in an eloquent way of you're trying to get them a little bit of support from management with this report as well to take up to say this, I'm not meeting this and this is why. We don't recommend what tools to go get, how to solve it, but there has to be some investment in this area to meet compliance. So sometimes I'm kind of on their side because I know what it's like to not have the tools that you need to get to where you want to go. To say, yeah, I feel like I'm fully compliant versus don't look over here. I hope the auditor doesn't look over here. They can look here, but just not here.
I was on a call with you a couple weeks ago, and the customer was like, "It's fine. We like using this information to go to other departments and do things." So.
Well, and from the engineering side, with my internal work with customers, we're trying to help them. You need more headcount to get the job done right?
Right.
We'll give you the business case.
Right.
Here's the extra 2 bodies you've been begging for 2 years. Just let us do our job.
Need budget? Clients would be able to get budget.
But budgets will come as time goes, especially with algorithm place of as time goes on, keep such. The question is, will that happen fast enough?
No.
Yeah.
Budget, the money rains down when something wrong goes. When something
Right.
wrong happens.
Right.
Colonial Pipeline right now, their entire 2022 budget is in cybersecurity. Yeah, that's the bottom line is when something bad happens, look at Equifax. How many cyber guys did they hire in the next year? How much money did they spend on time?
That's how we last. Yeah. So I was a manager, and the security director went to Equifax. Right. So yeah, I've seen that.
I used to work for 2 insurance companies, both of which scaled down. They had one CEO that heard all the target stuff, we Target, Home Depot, with all that. Increased budget to almost $1 billion in security. $1 to $3 billion. Board of directors didn't like that. Kicked him, introduced the CEO, security budget's no longer. And that's a lot of money, but you're also talking about insurance, which is bad.
Well, but that also comes down to, nothing bad's happened for the last 18 months.
I'm telling you, that should be a t-shirt.
The famous last words, yeah, I'm not having to worry about it.
Yeah. Or you never get laid off for 5 insurance companies.
Yeah, we hear that from time to time too. That won't happen to us.
That'll never happen.
Right? A year later, they'll call and they'll be like, well, you remember that time we said not us?
Yeah.
Well, turns out it was.
You know what happens when that happens? It brings the security part of the company. And for some reason,
Well, that headhunting mentality though needs to go. It's not ever, almost, I won't say ever, it's rarely just one person. I'll say it's never any just one person's responsibility. What happened at Equifax was not 2 system admins that didn't update a box. It was an entire string of process that didn't double check that there wasn't division of duty, that there wasn't audit, there wasn't compliance, and somebody wasn't looking. The manager didn't do their job. The director didn't do their job. So it's never just one person. It's not a headhunt. If it turns into a headhunt, you're going to have problems finding people really quickly in this business.
All right. Over time.
Yep.
And they will lock us in here, I think. So,